Okay, so we're going to continue discussion about currency and focus on the question of why do countries have their own currencies. We talked about the value of the US dollar during the Bretton Woods system when it was pegged to gold, and now the current system where it's a free floating currency. Why do countries want their own currency if so many other people in other countries believe in the value of the dollar? And this has been a point of discussion for a while. So the philosopher John Stuart Mill talked about how this is a very barbaric practice where countries have their own currencies. And one of the reasons why is it's an inconvenience. It's an inconvenience in terms of trade, financial flows. If I go to another country, I have to convert my currency into their currency in order to make transactions. And it doesn't seem to be the right way or a very efficient way to carry out exchange. But the main reason why countries want their own currency is it maintains sovereignty over their economy. So this word sovereignty comes back up, right, where you have more control over your economy. If you're Ecuador and your main currency is the US dollar, you don't have a lot of control or sovereignty when it comes to using monetary policy to control the economy. So I'm recording this video on March 12th, and so far the markets are just crashing today, and for a lot of different reasons, but of course the coronavirus and the lack of response from the US government on the coronavirus has caused the markets to panic. And so to try to remedy this, the US Treasury, along with the Federal Reserve, has tried to add money into the economy so that people will continue to spend. And that's what monetary policy is. So using money, using interest rates, using other things tied to currency to get the economy moving in the direction you want. Right? And so if you have monetary autonomy, you can print money when you want to inject liquidity into the market. Ecuador cannot do that. Right? Other currencies will have limited ability to do that if they do not have monetary autonomy. Okay. And so the problem with this, though, is money is not free. The US Treasury can't just print as much money as it wants. The idea then, if it just prints a lot of money, no one's going to believe in the value of that currency. And we see this at the end of World War I. So what this middle column shows is, one is what the price of something was in 1914. So let's say a loaf of bread is $1 in 1914. That same loaf of bread would be $3 in the UK in 1920, $6 in Italy in 1926, $7 in Belgium in 1926, and $12 in Finland in 1921. Right? And the reason for that is those countries increase the amount of money in their market, right? Printing more money to pay for things, but because they put more money into their economies, the prices of those things also increased. But these countries were not the worst. We see then in Austria that loaf of bread that was $1 in 1914 is now $14,000. We see in Hungary is now $26,000. And the worst of the worst is Germany. Now, Germany was saddled with debts at the end of World War I. They're on the losing side of that war, and the Allies forced Germany to essentially pay for the war. Now, Germany decided to pay for that war in German marks, and so they just printed a lot of money, and as a result, German marks weren't worth anything. And so a loaf of bread that was once $1 in 1914 is now going to be $1.2 trillion in 1923, which is just ridiculous. But at that point, nobody believes in the value of the German mark, right? The value of the paper is probably worth more than what the value of the number printed on their certain bills. So you can't just print money, you have to use it responsibly, and some countries don't even have it. Like I said, like Ecuador does not have monetary autonomy. Zimbabwe is a more recent example where you see $250 million to pay for a piece of candy. And that's the drawback of having this monetary economy, right? You get inflation and you also have currency volatility. So a country like Ecuador does not have control over its economy, or complete control over its economy, because it doesn't have access to monetary policy. But everybody knows exactly what Ecuador's currency is worth. It's worth US dollars. US dollars, the British pound, the Japanese yen, these are all exchanged on markets, and these can change depending on how much demand or how much supply there is in the market. This exchange is not a physical location. It's not like the kiosks at the airport. These are markets that operate around the world. And again, they're determined by hundreds of thousands of individuals or banks who are buying and selling this currency. So the exchange rate in this foreign exchange market is determined by how much of a currency is in the market. So that's the supply. So here is the supply of the pounds, and this is how much money that the Bank of England decides to put into its economy. Right? That's set by the government. And then you have the demand, and this is how many people want this. So if people are traveling to England, they're going to need pounds. Firms, if I'm going to invest in the UK or buy British goods, I'm going to need pounds. And governments will need this too. And why would governments need British pounds? Well, you might want to have reserves of British pounds to keep your own currency in a stable situation. Now, if people stop going to the UK or stop investing in the UK, you can imagine that the demand would decrease. And so what you do is look at this new line, and that's the price. So the price used to be up here. That's the original price. And now you have the old price, and that decreases the value or the exchange rate for that particular currency, right? And then you can also imagine that as the supply goes up, right, this blue line is going to the right, that's also going to drop the price of the currency, right? So countries that don't have monetary policy include those that have adopted other countries' currencies, like Ecuador. Those who are in unified currencies, like the euro. Like Italy does not have its own monetary policy. Its monetary policy is governed by the European Bank. And then if you have a pegged exchange rate, you are also going to have no monetary autonomy. And we'll talk about that more in the next video, but this is a problem, right? So if you have a pegged exchange rate, or again, that's the $35 of gold, you can't just print off more money without getting more gold. So let's say I try to do that. So I have $35, I'm a government, and in my pocket, I also have 1 ounce of gold. Well, I decide to double my supply and say, okay, I printed out another $35. Now I have $70 in my economy, but I still only have 1 ounce of gold to back that up. And I try to use that in the economy. Well, as soon as somebody tries to make that exchange, right, that they try to exchange $35 for an ounce of gold, they do that once, and I am left with no gold and $35 in the market that has no gold attached to that. And if that money in the market or in the economy has no gold attached to it, then it's worthless, right? And so that's the problem of having a fixed exchange rate. It takes away from your monetary economy. And again, we'll talk more about that in a second. This was a big issue In the end of the 19th century, the Democrats made a big deal of this. They rather that the U.S. just get off the gold standard or switch to a silver standard, and this would increase the amount of credit available in the American market, particularly for farmers. And this was essentially the meaning of the Wizard of Oz, and the yellow brick road was supposed to represent the gold exchange rate. And essentially the story is this gold standard leads you to a big promised land, but that promise turns out to be a big fake. And so the U.S. should consider dumping its gold standard. All right, we'll end there, and we'll talk more about the trade-off of monetary autonomy in the next video.